Thank you so much for joining us with Coffee with the Candidates. We have Brian Hunhoff with us here today, who is running in the 2023 City Commission election. Thank you for joining us here today. So as a reminder to the viewers today, Election Day is Tuesday, April 11th. You vote at the City Hall Gym or the North Fire Station number 2 from the hours of 7 a.m. to 7 p.m. And if you choose to vote absentee, you can start that Monday, March 27th. That is only in the City Hall Gym from 8 a.m. to 5 p.m. Brian, why don't you go ahead and start by telling the viewers a little bit about yourself.
All right. Thank you. Brian Hunhoff is my name, and I'm one of 8 Hunhoff brothers that grew up on a farm north of Yankton. And most of us live here in the city of Yankton now. All my other brothers are allegedly retired, but it seems to me like they're busier than ever, so I don't know if that's true. I myself have lived in Yankton since the 1970s, and I've had 3 distinctly different careers during my time here. I initially was the editor of a weekly newspaper here for about 20 years. And then after that, I became aide out at the Human Services Center, and I did that for 10 years. And then following that, for the last 17 years now, I've been the Yankton County Register of Deeds. It's a job I really enjoy, and I was humbled a few years ago to be actually recognized as the outstanding county official in the state as far as its service to the public. Prior to becoming Register of Deeds, I actually served on the Yankton County Commission for 10 years. And so I've now been a public elected servant in this community for 27 consecutive years, and maybe a few more, hopefully, we'll see. My wife and I met and we married in 1983, Roxanne. And after graduating from Mount Marty College, she became a teacher for the Yankton School District. She's now been teaching at Beadle School for 32 years, never wanted to teach anyplace else. And we have 4 children and 4 grandchildren. Our youngest, Olivia, is a senior at Yankton High School, and she's very busy right now at the spring musical. That's one of her passions. They're going to perform Frozen this year, which is pretty appropriate after the winter we've had. And some people may or may not know this, but the director is actually Amy Miner, one of our current city commissioners. And she just does a terrific job really getting the best out of those kids and putting on a great show for the community. So we're looking forward to that. It's about 6 weeks. My next daughter, Emily, is a teacher in Houston. She took after her mom, an elementary teacher, and she's married to an attorney in Houston. His name is Jack, and they're actually expecting their first child here later this summer, so pretty exciting time for us. And my oldest daughter, Elizabeth, is an attorney for Best Buy in Minneapolis, and she and her husband, Andy, are raising 2 very active young fellows named Owen and Jameson. And then I have a son, Max, and he's a dispatcher for the Nebraska Public Power District. And his wife, Kristen, is a high school science teacher in Norfolk. And they actually have an 18-month-old named Mason Brian Hunhoff, who I'm pretty sure is the cutest, smartest toddler in the entire state of Nebraska. And I also can't forget our corgis, Mabel and Dipper. They're a big part of our family too.
Well, I appreciate you bringing up theater and the arts, because that is one of the things that really helps Yankton stand out from a lot of other communities.
Absolutely.
There are a lot of experiences that young people as well as adults can participate in the Yankton community.
We're really rich in that regard, thanks to people like Amy, who've really promoted it over the years. Really, there's no shortage of things to attend here, that's for sure.
Yeah, it's nice. I wanted to also touch on your Register of Deeds position. So that is an elected position, and did I hear you say you've been in that position for 17 years? Have you ever had, out of curiosity, anyone ever run against you for that position?
Well, no. I want to explain that, though. When I ran for county commission, I was elected to 3 terms on the county commission. I was always challenged, usually at a primary and a general election. But now I've been elected to my 5th term now as Register of Deeds, and I've not yet been opposed in that position.
I think there's a lot of people who don't even fully understand what that position, what you do in that position either. So thank you for serving in that role for the county.
I'll give a real thumbnail sketch there. I call it kind of a county record keeper, and we keep people records and land records. The land records would be real estate, like mortgages and deeds. And then the people records are things like marriage licenses, burial permits, birth and death certificates. And it's really interesting. Each of those things seems to take about half of our time, and so it's to me, the variety makes it very fascinating.
I bet you meet a lot of interesting people, that is for sure.
A lot of genealogists and so forth.
Oh, very true, yes. So what skills or experiences do you have that set you apart from the other candidates?
I'm a critical thinker, and I think I have a fairly good ability to sort out the good ideas that have merit from the bad ideas that maybe don't make as much sense. And I'm going to give a perfect example. It was last summer's near closure of the Summit Fitness Center. I studied the numbers. I looked into the city's stated reasons for wanting to close it, and it just didn't add up for me. And so I decided to do something about it. I wrote an article for the Press and Dakotan, an editorial, and had a huge response from that. And that sort of inspired me to go out and actually start collecting signatures on a petition. And over the week's time, I gathered 400 signatures. And then I was able to convince over 100 of those people to come to a city commission meeting and actually voice their opinions, their opposition to closing that facility. And so to me, that was an example of where I didn't think it was a good idea, so I studied it and came up with a different opinion. They say you can't fight City Hall, and that's usually true. But every once in a while you have to try, and this time it worked out. I'm glad it did because it's a fine facility. And that experience kind of convinced me to run for city commission because a lot of people during that process encouraged me to run. And I thought, after watching the city budget hearings, seeing some questions that I would have asked that were not asked, I thought, well, maybe I have something to add. So I want to be sure when the budget hearings roll around next summer that there's a commissioner in that room that will really stand up and defend the summit. And last time I didn't think the commissioners sufficiently challenged city staff on some of the merits or lack of the proposal to close it. And so I have a lot of natural curiosity. Maybe it comes from my days as a reporter, or maybe I always had it, but I like to ask questions and press for answers. And that's something I think I can add to the current board, which is a very good board. But when you look to add something, or you look to join something, you say, what am I going to contribute? And that's how I see my contribution. In terms of other experience, I have a pretty long history of community involvement. I am currently serving on the Summit Center Task Force, and we've all been working hard on that to come up with ideas to make the facility even better and more cost efficient. I've also been on the Yankton Federal Prison Camp Board, the Human Services Center Board, the City Library Board, the Chamber of Commerce Board, the County Planning Commission, the County Extension Board, the County Ditch Board, the 4-H Extension Board, and I know I'm forgetting a few, but suffice to say I've attended a lot of meetings over the years. And turn the page here. I want to say that having been a resident and homeowner here for over 40 years, I think I have a longevity in the community that helps me keep our current challenges in perspective. My 10 years on the county commission, I thought, taught me a lot about local government. And I think they demonstrated my dedication when I'm given a public role that I will, really be committed to it. And what I mean by that is there were 403 meetings, county commission meetings, during my 10 years, and I missed one. I attended 402. The only one I missed was when my son, who was then 9 years old, was having an emergency open heart surgery in Omaha. But I'm very dedicated when I take a position on, and I do my best to serve the public and serve the citizens. I also have considerable leadership experience. I'm a former chairman of the county commission, but I'm also past president of the South Dakota Newspaper Association, past president of the South Dakota County Officials Group, and a past president of the South Dakota Senior Games Organization. So I've been involved in a lot of leadership roles with those different jobs.
So do you want to share a little bit about the senior games? I know you've had a lot of success in those, and I think that's something that people would find interesting.
Yeah, senior games I think is one of the best kept secrets in South Dakota, but it's basically an athletic competition. And by athletic, I mean we have tons of different events. We really try to provide something for everybody. And it's a competition for people 50 years and older. And you compete against people within a 5-year, parameter of your age. So right now I'm competing in the 60 to 64 group. And it's really not about the competition though, because you see the competitors really cheering for each other and supporting each other more so than competing against each other. And so the competition is really with yourself. You know what you did last year in a given event, and you strive to, maybe surpass that or at least match it as you grow older. And that's the real competition part of it. But there's so many social benefits to it. You just meet a lot of really terrific people that know that the secret of life is just to keep moving, and at least the secret to aging healthily. And I always, like to think that we don't grow old because we stop playing. We don't stop playing because we grow old. We grow old because we stop playing. I got that turned around, but that's sort of my philosophy, and I think for a lot of the different competitors and participants in the senior games.
So is that always in the same location, or does it rotate around the state?
It started in Pierre. State Social Services Department actually started it about 40 years ago. And so that was always in Pierre. That's where they held it. And then the state decided they didn't want to be involved anymore. So a bunch of local folks like myself, I wasn't there at that time, but we decided to form a board, a volunteer board, and do our own fundraising, and get sponsorships. And now, since we've done it that way, we move it every 2 years to a different city. So the last couple of years, it's been in Watertown. The next 2 years now, it's going to be in Pierre. And after that, I believe Huron. So it's a 2-year, and then we rotate.
Wonderful. Thank you for sharing that. So what are the most important components, in your opinion, of being a city commissioner?
The most important thing is to have a love for Yankton, just a desire to maintain this wonderful quality of life that we have here. And it's important to have a willingness to listen with an open mind to everybody. And finally, I think it's important to have a basic knowledge of open government, open meetings, do's and don'ts. And I have a fairly good record in that way. We want city business to be conducted with as much transparency as possible. In 2005, I became one of the very first locally elected officials to receive the state's First Amendment Eagle Award for protecting the public's right to know. And a lot of times that will go to a statewide figure, like Governor Dugard received it, the Attorney General received it one year, the South Dakota Supreme Court, but it also goes to local officials. I was one of the first, and it was for my efforts just to keep Yankton County business and Yankton County meetings as open to the public as possible. And Mark Johnson, a commissioner I served with, once told a reporter, he said, "Brian always does his best to make sure the public is informed of any discussion or action by the commission whenever possible." And I appreciated that because I do strive, for that. In 2013, I wrote an article called "The 10 Commandments of Open Meetings," and it actually won a National Golden Quill Award for editorial writing, but more important than that, it was published in hundreds of newspapers in all 50 states. And editors across the country told me that article really changed and improved local government open meeting practices in their communities. Because they would reprint it, and these local officials would maybe learn things they didn't even know they were supposed to not be doing. So, and then in 2019, I don't want to harp too long on open government, but in 2019, this was a career highlight. I was selected to Heroes of the 50 States, which is the State Open Government Hall of Fame. It has 2 names. And it's an honor given by the National Freedom of Information Coalition. And the criteria is a long and steady effort to preserve and protect the free flow of information about state and local government that is vital to the public in a democracy. That was a real career highlight. I'm the first South Dakota inductee, and for them to notice me out here was kind of surprising.
Yeah, it's interesting how they found you,
Yep.
or you found yourself in their eye of attention. So, in your opinion, what's the biggest challenge the city may encounter in the next 3 years?
I think the need for more affordable housing, workforce housing, is just paramount, and it's directly related to our second biggest need, obviously, which is we need more people here to fill all these job openings. We need more people to move here and live here and take advantage of our wonderful quality of life. I think our unemployment rate right now is about 2%, and so that's about as low as it gets at this
It's actually
point.
1.6. I looked
Okay,
at that
well,
number today, which is even worse than 2.
It was 2 in December, so
Yep,
it's come down
yep.
a few points. Anyway, that's obviously about as low as you're going to get, and so it's a clear sign we just simply need more people to come here, and we have a lot to offer, and I hope we can get that done. I think the city should always do everything they can to encourage, the additional affordable workforce housing and also encouraging people to move here. And I'm glad to see Yankton Thrive has really made that the forefront of their current efforts.
Yeah, we certainly have our Yes For campaign. The majority of those dollars are focused on housing and workforce. And it's nice that we have good partners like the city and the county and our strong business community to help us accomplish those goals.
I do have a few other things that often come up. Now, they're not the biggest challenge. I mentioned what I believe that is, but there are a few other challenges that people bring up when I'm out campaigning. And that one is the need to do something about the Yankton Mall. And I know that's not easy, and I know the city has made efforts in that regard in the past, but it just seems like if we could just find a way to incentivize repurposing that in some way. You know, it's a 665,000 square foot building at a great location. I don't know what, maybe apartments, senior living, maybe some kind of a recreational attraction or an indoor park, but there's got to be something where we could, you know, take advantage of that facility at that location and make something work. Also, and this is somewhat related to that, people really talk a lot about, might not seem like the biggest issue to everybody, but they talk a lot about the need for a movie theater in this town. And I would sure think we could support one, and I have some ideas on how we could possibly sustain that if we could get that started. And then you hear a lot about the need for another grocery store in town, just simply for more competition for food prices. So those are all challenges that, you know, I'll certainly be on the outlook for as far as ways we can maybe fill some of those needs.
So how are you able to reconcile your personal job responsibilities and commitments with your responsibilities that you will have if elected as a city commissioner?
Well, like most of our other city commissioners, I do have a full-time job. We talked about the Register of Deeds job. And I think the key to that when you have a part-time role and a full-time role is just simply time management. You know, and I do know how to do that. I learned that from years of having jobs that required a lot of hours. My full-time job, as I said, is Register of Deeds, and some will question, I'm sure, if it's appropriate for one person to hold two elected positions in a community. I expect that it's a fair question, and ultimately Yankton voters are going to be the ones who answer it because they'll make that decision on April 11th. But I did look into the legality of this before I went out and gathered 100 signatures on my petition to run for city commission. I didn't want to waste that time unless I knew it was something that was acceptable. And the South Dakota Municipal League issued a report some years ago on what they considered city-county job combinations that were compatible and incompatible. And City Commission and Register of Deeds was one of those that is listed as a compatible combination for one person to hold concurrently. It's not prohibited by statute. The reasons for that are it's not prohibited by statute, there's no overlap in duties, there's no inherent conflict of interest, and neither position has any supervision or subordination to the other. You know, they're independent. The Municipal League report I mentioned was based on a series of Attorney General opinions over the years. That's what they compiled it from. And the opinion related to my particular situation right now was when the Falk County Commission wanted to appoint the mayor of Falkton, which is the county seat for Falk County. They wanted to appoint the mayor of Falkton to the Register of Deeds position. So the Attorney General studied that, reviewed it, and said he felt that was a compatible combination for one person to hold at the same time. Obviously, we can all think of examples of city-county combinations that would not be appropriate for somebody to hold at the same time. County judge and city attorney, county auditor and city finance officer, you know, there's all kinds of potential problems with those, but I don't think the combination that I'm trying to accomplish here would present any problems.
Well, thank you for clarifying that, because there's not a lot of people who would go out and do the research to see if those are compatible positions, but it is interesting to see the list of positions that are compatible.
It's a list, it's about 15 examples of those they felt were compatible and 15 they felt were not, and I should have brought it along, but it's available if you Google it.
So now a fun question. What are your 3 favorite things about Yankton?
I'm going to have to give you 4. You know, I just think we have wonderful schools and great health care. I love our historic downtown district and our beautiful parks. And obviously I better add the Missouri River. That's a pretty unique and special thing. But those are things. I have favorite places in Yankton too. And that would be things like the City Hall, which I think is a real cool older building that's seen a lot of local history. Bishop Marty Chapel is a favorite place for me. The Meridian Bridge is obviously our iconic feature here in this community. And the Mead Museum, and I'm going to say the Summit Center. You know, there's really more to that place than just a swimming pool and an indoor gym. It's a family recreation center for this community. And it's a gathering place for all ages, and it's especially needed in a place where we have such long winter months, long cold seasons, because it's an indoor facility that gives us something to do during those times, and it's been a beehive of activity this winter.
No, I bet it has. I know a lot of people used to walk out at the Yankton Mall, but many
Yeah.
people do appreciate the indoor track
yeah.
up there at the Summit Activity Center.
And Mount Marty has a fantastic gym with an indoor track, but because their first commitment is to the college, they don't always have the public access that you have at the Summit, as much anyway.
Yeah, that makes sense. I'm not sure if I want to be walking around that track when the football team's
Yeah,
practicing in there.
And they probably don't want us at that particular time, at least not on the track, but I'm not sure.
So ongoing revenue is a challenge for the city, especially considering potential tax modifications by the state. What are your thoughts on what it would take to create a balanced budget and manage needs versus wants?
I think it takes careful stewardship of our taxpayer dollars and really drilling down during the budget process and being as accurate as possible with anticipated expense and income. On the county commission, we were almost entirely relying on property taxes. That was about all we had. Cities at least do have the advantage of having two primary tax sources of revenue, which would be, of course, property and sales tax. And fortunately, for some time now, it seems like our sales tax collections have been running ahead of expectations. That's great to see. In regards to wants versus needs, needs are not that hard to identify. We all know what those are: clean water, good streets, law enforcement that ensures our public safety. Those are needs, and those have to always come first. But wants, if you mean things like Fox Run Golf Course or the library, those are very important too. Those quality of life amenities, things like the Aquatic Center and the Summit Center, these are features you need to give people a reason to want to move here and live here. There are incentives for people to choose this as the place they want to raise their family. And in fact, last summer during that Summit Center issue, there were some young families that stood up and said that was the Summit Center was the facility that really kind of sealed the deal for them as to why they wanted to move to Yankton and raise their family here. But ultimately, that's the job of the city commission, to decide what level of funding those quality of life amenities receive, and it takes some discussion and some compromise, and that's their job, and that's how I see it.
Yeah, it's never an easy task when you're trying to balance that budget.
No, I was very proud of our record during my 10 years on the county commission, our record in being able to stretch the taxpayer dollar. And when I started my first term on the county commission, we had the worst highway facility in the state. It was on Broadway. We had by far the worst ambulance facility in the state. Our safety center housed our jail and court facilities, but both were very inadequate. Our needs had long since passed by what those facilities were when they were built. And then our courthouse was just absolutely crumbling. It was a handsome building from the street, even in its last years, but people don't realize there was no structural integrity left in the walls and the upper level flooring. And it was absolutely unsafe really to occupy from terms of a live load, moving people. These problems all existed when I started my time as county commissioner, and by the time I was done, we had solved all of those problems. It wasn't just me, it was a team effort, but I was really proud to see that. And now we have some of the very finest county facilities in the state. And those improvements really had a relatively low impact on our local tax bills. Most all of those things I mentioned are long since paid for. And we were fortunate to some degree. We had good bids, and we tried to, put forth reasonable ideas that the public would want to accept and support. But we were also fortunate that we did a lot of our building and remodeling during a time before construction costs went through the roof, and it's a different world now.
Yeah, timing is everything
Yeah.
on some
So
of
we
those
had some
types
good
of
fortune.
projects.
Yep.
Because I know even from listening to the state discussions now, a lot of the projects that they started, with some of the COVID dollars that were available for projects, the cost overruns are so high. And I know that both the county and the city are experiencing that within their budgets as well.
Yep. Yeah, there's I think 17 counties right now in danger of going bankrupt. Fortunately, Yankton is not one of them, but there's some big counties and some small counties in that group, but it just shows you the challenge when you have limited revenue.
So there have been some hot topics since COVID where groups get fired up on one specific topic. How do you intend to communicate with your constituents to try to understand what the majority support rather than a vocal minority?
By talking to people. And not just the people you have coffee with or the people you work with, but try to reach out to other people, lots of different people from all of our different neighborhoods. And if you talk to enough people, I think you will find out what the majority wants. I'm gonna come back one more time to that Summit Center issue. I went out knocking on doors that week and tried to hit every neighborhood in town, and I did, and talked to hundreds of people, either on their doorstep or inside their front door. And by doing that, by visiting all those homes, I felt confident that a majority of the people wanted that Summit Center facility to stay open. And so that's how you do it. Al Sinclair, a former county commissioner I served with, he once said, Brian has a real grasp, a real good grip on what the people of this community want. And I appreciate Al saying that, but it's not rocket science. It's just from talking to a lot of people and trying to make sure you talk to a variety of people so you can get, try to determine what the community opinion is on a given issue.
Yeah, the reason this topic or this question became kind of apparent to me that it should be asked was I was writing these during a snowstorm. And I was seeing a lot of feedback online about people who were unhappy about how our streets were being maintained.
Okay.
They thought we should have snow gates, which we all understand are not effective in a 12-inch snow. And they were just unhappy with sanitation, pickup, and the schedules had been changed. And I thought, gosh, there's just a really vocal group unhappy about this, but there's thousands of people like me who are very satisfied and were very pleased that city staff was able to accomplish what they could with the limited resources, the limited number of people they have with CDLs, and how they were able to be flexible with their schedule. And so the commissioners would be seeing these negative comments, but they weren't hearing from people like me who should be reaching out and saying thank you and I appreciate all the efforts. And it's very difficult as an elected position, elected official, because most of the people aren't commenting on a subject if they're happy about it.
No, that's a good example. You hear from the ones that complain, and a lot of the others kind of take us for granted by not telling us, that it's appreciated. But at the county commission meeting, the last couple of meetings when we've had big snowstorms, there have been a couple of citizens that stood up in our public input period and did compliment our county highway crews, and so that was really nice to see.
Yeah, it's sometimes a thankless job to be out there plowing those streets in the early hours of the morning, trying to make it so people like you and I can get to work.
Yeah, they're very dedicated.
That is for sure. So is there anything that you would like to include in this interview today that was not a part of a previously asked question?
Well, people ask me a lot now, because I'm on the task force, how the Summit Center is doing right now as compared to last summer. And I'm really happy to say it's doing great. It's like I say, it's been a beehive of activity last fall and this winter. And the Summit parking lot is full of Summit users and usually spilling over into the high school, the adjacent high school parking lot. And last summer, city officials wanted to close it because of the losses that they saw with the facility, the financial losses. But they never really told us the key figure, which was how much would be saved by closing specifically that second floor fitness operation. They were always giving us the number that the facility would lose as a whole. And I thought that would be the first thing we'd need to know, but because most members believe that fitness operation is the most cost-effective part of the Summit. But it gets the most use, and I think, in my opinion, it probably creates the most memberships, but it doesn't cost nearly as much as, for example, the pool, which is also very important and needed, that indoor pool. But when you talk about the losses, it's not so much due to the fitness room. But let's forget about the fitness room for a minute and just talk about the facility as a whole. Most people don't know this. I don't think it's really been put out, but I know it from serving on the task force. The Summit really outperformed its budget expectations by a mile last year in 2022. The city budgeted $665,714 for anticipated losses at the Summit Center, the facility as a whole, and the actual loss turned out to be $339,799. So that's quite a difference. And this year, 2023, the city had budgeted $685,058 in losses, and it's only been 2 months, but I've seen the numbers from the first 2 months, and based on all the activity and the income that I've seen, I think we're gonna do far better than 685,000. I think it'll probably be in that 300s again, and maybe better, because we're trying to find ways to improve the bottom line and find more sponsorships and revenue and things like that. But it's significant because those big numbers, 665,000 and 685,000, they were really driving the city's argument for wanting and needing to close it, and they were not accurate. So it would have been a real shame if we'd stopped the beating heart of the summit based on some very incorrect projections. And I don't mean to say it's easy to project revenue and expenses, but it's important to try to come as close as you can. I love Yankton. I want to do my part to keep it the best place to live, which I think it is. And if elected, I'll work hard to represent everybody. All 9 of our current commissioners are great people, they're fine citizens, and I'm not running because I think they're doing a bad job. I'm running because I think I have a fresh perspective that could make that good city commission even a little better. And I want to be a voice for a lot of the people who maybe don't think their opinions are really heard or considered at City Hall. I believe everyone's opinions are important because Yankton works better together. That's my campaign slogan. And I have nothing but respect for the other 5 people in the race, by the way. I think it's a great group, and voters can't go wrong whoever they vote for. It's a well-qualified field. But I ran to give Yankton a choice, something different, and I think I have something to add. And I hope some of you will cast one of those 3 votes for me. Thank you.
And as a reminder, Election Day is Tuesday, April 11th at the City Hall Gym or North Fire Station number 2 from 7 a.m. to 7 p.m. Brian, thank you so much for joining us today.
Thank you very much for the opportunity.